Today, we begin in the middle of a moment many immigrants will never forget. A policy shift that families had mourned, officials had justified, and communities had condemned. A sudden silence. A bright press conference light illuminating officials who refused to apologize. A question that sounds simple, but gets no answer. This shift didn't unfold over months. It unfolded in 72 hours. 72 hours after 2 people died. 72 hours after Minneapolis erupted. 72 hours after officials chose policy defense over human decency. One wrong choice here, and trust between immigrants and authorities shatters permanently tomorrow. What officials refused crossed a line that families hoped would break them. And when that line held despite 2 deaths, immigrant communities did not hesitate. They responded with protests, demands, and questions so pointed they exposed the complete absence of accountability. Most people wait for official apologies. They make the same mistake. They fall straight into the trap. But today, you're going to do something different. For 10 days now there had been signals, not from official statements, not from city press releases, just signals, that Minneapolis officials were preparing something unprecedented in their refusal. Officials have been defensive, yes, but also increasingly callous in that approach. Their responses followed a pattern, a script, almost a legal strategy. But what triggered outrage in immigrant communities this week was that the pattern never broke even after deaths. Experts who monitor police accountability recognize the indicators. The legal language carefully avoiding liability, the refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing, the policy justifications that ignore human loss, the complete absence of empathy. And when officials refuse to apologize after killing community members, something fundamental breaks in public trust. Community leaders noticed something else. The statements being issued weren't just about legal protection. They were about maintaining enforcement authority. They were about justifying future operations. They were about ensuring that 2 deaths wouldn't change how federal and local agencies operate in immigrant neighborhoods. For immigrant families who knew Renee Good and Alex Pretti, this wasn't abstract policy debate. For communities where those names now represent fear instead of people, this wasn't political posturing. For neighborhoods where residents now hide when they hear sirens, this was officials choosing power over accountability. The shootings happened, and nobody in authority would say they were wrong. Early last week, Minneapolis residents detected what they described as escalating enforcement activity, including aggressive patrol patterns not seen in immigrant neighborhoods for over a year. These are operations law enforcement only conducts when prioritizing enforcement over community relations. Unmarked vehicles, plainclothes officers, high-speed pursuits, or deadly force in situations that didn't require it. Observers weren't sure which tactics led to the shootings, or whether all of them combined. But one thing was clear. Something went catastrophically wrong, and when catastrophe strikes, accountability should follow. It didn't. Behind the scenes, immigrant rights organizations began documenting something horrifying. Not just the shootings themselves, the official response afterward. The refusal to release details, the stonewalling of investigations, the legal maneuvering to avoid responsibility, the complete absence of acknowledgement that 2 people died unnecessarily. They understood something crucial. How officials respond to tragedy reveals more than the tragedy itself, and this response revealed contempt. The statement issued by Minneapolis officials after the shootings was not apologetic. It was not empathetic. It was defensive. Official after official described the enforcement operations as justified, necessary, and most importantly, compliant with department policy. But policy compliance doesn't resurrect the dead. Following procedures doesn't restore families. Legal justification doesn't heal communities. And when officials hide behind policy after killing people, they've chosen institutional protection over human dignity. Immigration advocates did not accept those justifications. Their response was among the most organized accountability demands Minneapolis has seen in years. They didn't just protest, they documented. They presented timelines showing enforcement escalation. They provided witness testimony contradicting official narratives. They demanded release of body camera footage. They called for independent investigations. And officials refused every demand. Today, community sources confirmed that Minneapolis officials rejected demands to apologize to families of Renee Good and Alex Pretti, including direct requests from family members that had been delivered through intermediaries for what advocates believe was basic human decency. They refused before investigations concluded. They maintained refusal after evidence emerged. They stonewalled accountability even as community anger intensified. This wasn't legal strategy, it was moral failure. And that's what made immigrant communities so enraged. Because when you kill someone and refuse to even acknowledge their family's grief, you're not protecting legal interests. You're demonstrating that their lives didn't matter enough to warrant an apology. Inside immigrant communities across Minneapolis, the impact is devastating. Families who were already afraid of enforcement are now terrified. Parents who used to let children play outside now keep them indoors. Workers who commuted safely now take different routes to avoid enforcement zones. The shootings didn't just kill Renee Good and Alex Pretti, they killed trust. And the refusal to apologize ensured that trust will never return. Community members are asking questions officials won't answer. What were Good and Pretti doing when they were shot? Were they armed? Did they pose immediate threats? Were de-escalation tactics attempted? Could non-lethal force have been sufficient? Officials claim investigations are ongoing, that they can't comment on active cases, that releasing details would compromise legal proceedings. But families deserve answers. Communities deserve transparency. And the longer officials refuse both, the more obvious it becomes that something inexcusable happened. The legal strategy is clear. Admit nothing, apologize for nothing, release nothing, wait for attention to fade, hope lawsuits settle quietly. Ensure no precedent is set that might restrict future enforcement. It's a strategy that protects institutions while sacrificing people. And it works because accountability mechanisms in law enforcement are designed to protect officers, not serve communities. Immigration attorneys are documenting a disturbing pattern. The Minneapolis shootings aren't isolated incidents. They're part of escalating enforcement that treats immigrant communities as enemy territory rather than neighborhoods requiring protection. Increased patrols in Latino areas, aggressive stops of people who look undocumented, high-speed pursuits over minor violations, use of force disproportionate to actual threats, and now, deadly shootings followed by official refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing. Each escalation builds on the previous one. Each refusal to apologize enables future abuses. Each time officials avoid accountability, enforcement becomes more dangerous. The cycle only breaks when officials face consequences. But consequences require political will. And political will requires public pressure that immigrant communities often can't generate because they're afraid to be visible. Renee Good's family released a statement that officials ignored. They described Renee as someone trying to build a life in America, someone who worked hard, someone who supported family, someone who deserved better than being shot and then having officials refuse to acknowledge the loss. The statement asked for simple things: an apology, an explanation, acknowledgement that Renee's life mattered, commitment that lessons would be learned so others wouldn't suffer the same fate. Officials provided none of it, not even basic condolences, just legal silence. That silence speaks volumes. It says immigrant lives aren't valuable enough to warrant apology. It says enforcement priorities matter more than community trust. It says officials will protect their authority at any cost, including the cost of human dignity. Alex Pretti's death received even less official acknowledgement. Fewer details were released. Fewer questions were answered. The circumstances remain murky because officials keep them that way. What is known is this: Pretti was killed during an enforcement operation. Officials claim the shooting was justified. No body camera footage has been released. No independent investigation has been conducted. No apology has been issued. A life ended, and officialdom's response is bureaucratic silence punctuated by legal maneuvering. Immigrant communities are connecting these shootings to broader enforcement patterns. This isn't just about Minneapolis. It's about how federal and local agencies operate in immigrant neighborhoods nationwide. ICE conducts operations with minimal oversight. Local police cooperate without questioning tactics. Federal agents operate with legal immunity. Shootings happen, and accountability vanishes into legal processes designed to protect officials rather than deliver justice. The Minneapolis shootings are extreme examples of a systemic problem. Enforcement without accountability, authority without oversight, power without consequences. And when that system produces deaths, officials apologize to no one. Community organizers are demanding specific policy changes in response to the shootings, not symbolic gestures, actual reforms. Independent investigations of all enforcement-related shootings, mandatory release of body camera footage within 48 hours, community oversight boards with real authority, prohibition of high-speed pursuits over minor violations, de-escalation training requirements. Officials have rejected every proposal. They claim oversight would interfere with operations, that transparency would compromise investigations, that community input would politicize law enforcement, that restrictions would prevent officers from protecting themselves. But officers who shoot unarmed people don't need more protection. Communities terrorized by enforcement do. The political dynamics around these shootings reveal deep divides. Progressive activists demand accountability. Law enforcement unions defend officers. City officials try to navigate between competing pressures. Federal agencies claim local incidents aren't their concern. And immigrant families who lost loved ones get nothing. No apology, no answers, no justice. Just silence from officials who killed their family members and refused to acknowledge it mattered. That silence has consequences beyond Minneapolis. Immigrant communities nationwide are watching. They see officials refuse accountability after deadly shootings. They understand that their lives are valued less than enforcement authority. They recognize that seeking protection from the very agencies most likely to harm them is impossible. Trust requires accountability. Accountability requires acknowledgement. Acknowledgement begins with apology. And when officials refuse even that basic human decency, trust dies alongside the people they killed. Immigration advocates are using these shootings to expose something ICE desperately hides. Enforcement operations have human costs that statistics never capture. People die. Families shatter. Communities terrorize. And officials face no consequences. The Minneapolis shootings aren't anomalies. They're predictable outcomes of enforcement strategies that prioritize aggressive action over community safety, that value deportation numbers over human life, that protect official authority more than the people officials supposedly serve. When you operate that way, eventually someone dies. And when officials refuse to apologize afterward, they guarantee it will happen again. Legal experts are explaining why officials refuse to apologize. Apologies can be used as evidence of wrongdoing in lawsuits. They can establish liability. They can undermine legal defenses claiming actions were justified and necessary. So, legal departments advise silence. Admit nothing. Acknowledge nothing. Apologize for nothing. Protect the institution even if it means abandoning basic humanity. That legal calculus treats deaths as liability risks rather than human tragedies. It prioritizes avoiding lawsuits over healing communities. It chooses institutional protection over moral responsibility, and it reveals exactly how officials view immigrant lives, as legal complications to be managed, not human beings whose deaths warrant grief. Community members who knew Good and Pretti personally are sharing stories officials will never hear. Stories about dreams they had, contributions they made, people they loved, lives they built despite every obstacle immigration status created. Those stories humanize what officials reduce to legal cases. They transform statistics into people. They demand acknowledgement that these weren't just enforcement incidents, these were lives ended. But officials aren't listening. They're consulting lawyers, crafting statements, protecting themselves, and proving that immigrant lives matter less than avoiding legal liability. The long-term impact on Minneapolis's immigrant community is incalculable. Parents teach children to fear police instead of seeking protection. Workers avoid entire neighborhoods where enforcement operates. Families stop reporting crimes because they're more afraid of officers than criminals. Community cohesion fractures because trust in authority dies. That damage persists for generations. Children growing up seeing officials kill community members and refuse accountability learn that the system doesn't serve them. They learn that their lives are valued less. They learn that authority protects itself, not the people it claims to serve. Those lessons create permanent alienation from civic institutions, and that alienation makes communities less safe, not more. So what should immigrants do with this information right now? First, understand that official refusal to apologize isn't just callousness. It's strategy. Legal strategy designed to minimize liability, even at the cost of community trust. Recognize it for what it is, so you're not shocked by institutional behavior. Second, document enforcement interactions. If you witness operations, record them if safe. If you're stopped, note officer names, badge numbers, circumstances. If you're detained, document treatment. Because official accounts will protect officers, not you. Third, support community organizations demanding accountability. Attend protests, sign petitions, contact elected officials, create political pressure for change. Because without pressure, officials will never choose accountability over legal protection. Fourth, know your rights during enforcement encounters. You don't have to answer questions about immigration status. You don't have to consent to searches. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. Exercise those rights. Fifth, have emergency plans for enforcement interactions. Who to call if detained, where important documents are located, how to contact an attorney, how to protect children if parents are arrested. Preparation doesn't prevent tragedy, but it reduces harm. Sixth, don't trust official narratives about enforcement incidents. Wait for community accounts. Demand evidence. Question legal justifications. Because officials who refuse to apologize for deaths aren't providing honest accounts of what happened. The Minneapolis shootings and the official response reveal fundamental truths about immigration enforcement. Immigrant lives are valued less. Official authority matters more than community trust. Accountability exists only when political pressure forces it. And apologies for killing people are apparently too much to expect. Those truths are harsh. But recognizing them prevents false hope that the system will suddenly prioritize justice over institutional protection. As investigations continue into the Minneapolis shootings, more details will eventually emerge. But one thing is already clear. Knowing this right doesn't make you a criminal. It makes you smart. It means you're prepared. It means you're protecting your family. Don't expect apologies from officials who refuse basic decency. Don't trust accountability systems designed to protect agencies, not communities. Don't assume enforcement that kills people will face consequences without massive pressure. Share this video with every immigrant who still believes the system serves them. It might save their life one day. Subscribe to USA Immigration Path for more protection. We protect you with real information as the next phase unfolds.